Penn State quarterback Drew Allar announced that he is returning for his senior season in 2025. And all of this only matters as long as the Nittany Lions continue to build around him.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of this live show here as we get the news about Beau Pribula. Now we have the news about Drew Allar. Today's live show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can keep the action going with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Looking for your comments, questions, reactions here in the middle of the day, but I have mine. Drew Allar coming back only matters as long as Penn State is going to build around him, because Drew Allar's not Superman. It is a big deal that Penn State is getting a quarterback returning for his third season of starting action, 4 years. Veteran experience matters in this case. Also, Andy Kotelnicki's back, so Drew Allar doesn't have to go through a third different coordinator, right? You have Mike Yurcich, Andy Kotelnicki, what would have been hypothetically a third different coordinator, and that's just Penn State a hire in-house, but now that's all taken care of. Andy Kotelnicki is back. So for Drew Allar to return, it is a big deal for Penn State, but it's only going to work. This is all only going to matter if they build around him through the portal. It has to be that way. You can fix things through the portal, because I look at it this way. Tyler Warren is leaving. It's still up in the air if Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen are going to come back. I know Julian Fleming didn't give Penn State a lot of statistical upside, but you're losing one of the smartest minds in the locker room right now from the player's standpoint on the roster. So Drew Allar, Trey Wallace, and Amari Evans, they're talented, they're good, they're going to start on this team in 2025, but that is not enough. When you could, at the end of the day, lose your three other biggest playmakers, which are Tyler Warren, Nicholas Singleton, and Kaytron Allen. Now, some of those boxes are checked off if Singleton decides to return. If you can get Allen back as well. If you get both of them back. But I don't know that that's likely. It's certainly possible, but it's not necessarily likely. So how does Penn State do this? They have to go through the transfer portal. How do you replace Tyler Warren's production? I think of Khalil Dinkins and Luke Reynolds and eventually Andrew Rapplier when he works his way back. But those guys aren't going to replicate Heisman-like production. That's what I'm trying to get at, is that this is Heisman-like production that you have to replicate somehow, some way. Trey Wallace can give you a solid option at the wide receiver spot, but the collection of them is Wallace, Evans, Reynolds, and Dinkins. Are those four enough to give Drew Allar the supporting cast that he needs to make this offense and take it to a next level? I think the chemistry between Allar and Kotelnicki is a step in the right direction, but that's why adding an elite wide receiver through the portal is so important here. You do have the spring football transfer portal window. There is a chance that Penn State doesn't have to necessarily land a playmaker now, but in the scheme of things, you want them through the winter transfer portal window and not wait. You want to get them acclimated and adjusted to the system, learning the playbook now, because Andy Kotelnicki's playbook is complicated. It is complicated, and we saw what happens with Adante Cephas, for example. This isn't obvious. This is an exception, not the standard. But in the case of Dante Cephas, the reason he struggled at Penn State, for the most part, was because he was not adapting to the playbook. So that's why it is important to get playmakers now, building chemistry, but also learning the playbook for that following 2025 season. But veteran experience above all else. You get QB1. Allar will be in the Heisman conversation solely because of what he's done. He's progressively gotten better, and Andy Kotelnicki has tapped into that next level of his game. Allar wouldn't be in this particular spot without Kotelnicki. I mean, also because of Allar. Allar's the one throwing the football, playing the games, but Kotelnicki, that combination has helped Drew Allar take that next step. Let's answer why he's coming back. And of course, I will get to your comments as well. We got multiple segments to talk about all this. Take your questions. We can even talk about Beau Pribula again too. But why did Allar come back? Because now people are catching on to what I've been saying, what other Penn State reporters have been saying, that Drew Allar is an NFL quarterback and not just, oh, well, he's a 5th or 6th round development. No, let's stop with that. The people that are saying that are just trying, they are being that way on purpose, because I don't know how you can logically come to this conclusion anymore that Drew Allar is not a legitimate quarterback prospect in the NFL. Mel Kiper and other draft analysts are starting to put him as the 3rd or 4th best quarterback prospect. So anybody that is saying that Drew Allar is not a capable quarterback is doing it on purpose, or they just do not legitimately watch or care about college football. So ignore them. So why is he coming back if he's the top 5 quarterback in next year's draft? That's good. That is good enough to get you taken in the 1st round. Well, it's not good enough to get you taken 1st overall. Now you could take the risk, take the gamble if you're Drew Allar. Drew Allar said it was a football decision. Allar said this was a football decision, and it is. To come back to Penn State, you now have the opportunity, and NIL helps with this. If we were not in the NIL era, Drew Allar would be going off to the NFL, because instead of making no money, you are now making X amount of millions of dollars. But my point being is that instead of being potentially someone who's taken at the end of the 1st round, when you still have that year of eligibility to develop and get better and actually be the 1st overall pick, why Drew Allar returns is because he now has an opportunity to play his way into being the 1st overall pick while making some NIL money on the side. So when you go into the draft and every selection gets an allotted dollar amount, and if you go 30th and maybe the 2nd round, say Drew Allar doesn't have a perfect combine or a pro day, enough for the scouts to say, you know what, this kid is a top 10, top 5 quarterback now. I think he is. I think the potential is there enough to take Allar with the top 10 selection. But here's the big difference. There is a big difference between getting a $10 million contract over 4 years if you're taken with one of the top, if you're taken 30 through 40th. That's including, so 1st and 2nd round, around picks 30 through 40. You're getting about $10 to $12 million, right? Roughly, give or take. But it's when you are the 1st overall pick, the 2nd overall pick, where that is life-changing money as a rookie, where you get $10 million per season, not just for a 4-year contract. You are getting $10 million, and it might be more than that if you are the 1st overall pick, but in that range per season, you're getting about 40 to 45 million. So Drew Allar is banking on the fact that if he returns for his senior season with Andy Kotelnicki and trusting that James Franklin and Penn State's NIL will be competitive enough to go get those playmakers that he needs, or to be able to retain Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen and find somebody that can at least help replicate what Tyler Warren gave you in that reliable option, that all of this will come together. Penn State will be a national title contender again in 2025, and they're laying the foundation for that. They are laying the foundation for that. But that's why Allar's coming back. Because instead of being, well, you're guaranteed to maybe get into the 1st round, maybe want to be one of the first selections on day 2, okay, that gets you some money, but Drew's going to be able to offset that with NIL. The difference is now he can play his way into being the 1st overall pick in the 2026 NFL draft. For what it's worth, I spoke to a Chicago Bears scout in passing, and I said this on another show, that, hey, I know you already have QB1. You have Caleb Williams, but what are your thoughts on Drew Allar? Just because I would have asked any other scout if I had, but I happened to bump into the Bears scout. And he says, I like what I saw from Allar, but he's a young quarterback. It would benefit him to come back for another season and play some more college football. Experience matters. Allar understands that. It is better for Allar to come back to Penn State. This was the right decision for him. Unfortunately, it ruins what Beau Pribula was trying to do with his college football career, and ruin hindsight. If he lands on his feet somewhere in another Power 4 school and starts for 2 years and has a great end to his college football career, then maybe it doesn't ruin things, but it ruins what he had set up at Penn State. So that's where we are. We'll check in on your comments, talk about portal receivers, because that's what matters here. If Drew Allar doesn't have anybody to throw the football to, then how important is this move? Does this even matter? We will talk about it more on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. It is that time of year. The College Football Playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you will love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate, live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. And let's check in on the comments as we are doing this live here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for joining. Ryan asks, any updates on possible portal receivers? Yes, we will talk about that, because Penn State is not doing, at least to my liking, I don't think they've done well enough with recruiting portal receivers right now. Missing on guys that are in that elite category. Okay, you can get as many good wide receivers as you want, if that's even going to be able to happen. But I look at the example of KC Concepcion, who's coming from NC State. Doesn't even have Penn State in his top 6. That was one of the first schools that he was in contact with, and Penn State's not even in the fold right now. You need a player like Concepcion. You have to supplement what Tyler Warren did. Does Luke Reynolds, does Khalil Dinkins, Trey Wallace, Amari Evans give you that in the passing game? I don't know. I don't know that the 4 of them. Tyser Denmark, you are banking on the fact that, okay, a redshirt freshman is going to be this all-encompassing, ready-to-go, world elite class wide receiver. That's a lot of ifs. That's a lot of what ifs. And I don't like the way that it's set up right now. Penn State needs to get competitive now in the portal. Justin, SMU fan, checking out. Roll on, brothers. Thanks so much for looking at the Penn State intel, right? Staying up to date with the opposing team. It is sad to see Beau leave, but worth it to enter next year with the best quarterback in the country. I think from a lot of accounts, Drew Allar is one of the best quarterback prospects that can go into now the 2026 NFL draft. And if he plays well, that's what he's banking on, is that he would be the first overall pick and then reap the rewards from that. That's why he's doing this. But you need the weapons to be able... Andy Kotelnicki can only do so much. Drew Allar as a quarterback can only do so much. You have to get pass catchers. You have to get playmakers. Harrison Wallace, Amari Evans, Luke Reynolds, and a healthy Caden Saunders. All solid, but not a true number 1 option there, and that's my point. That is my point. Tyler Warren needs triple teamed to be limited. It's for Trey Wallace, Amari Evans, and those other guys, unless they take a big leap forward, and Penn State would know better. Of course, Caden Saunders has not been healthy. It's just that elite playmaker is missing. I am hopeful that Amari Evans could take that step forward. I'm hopeful that Trey Wallace could, because he's supposed to be the number 1 wide receiver. But I personally haven't seen enough to say, all right, well, we know that Drew Allar is going to take the next step, that elite step forward. What about any of these guys? And then it's not a guarantee that Singleton comes back. It's not a guarantee that Katron Allen comes back for a variety of reasons, whether that's in Singleton's case for the NFL. Katron Allen's case could be the NFL too. I've just heard rumblings as far as the transfer portal. I'm not trying to start any rumors or anything like that, but just know that in the past, James Franklin and Pat Kraft have been upset about this, and it's the King Mac example, that agents are constantly contacting players around the country. This isn't just Penn State. Is player XYZ interested in playing at another school for this NIL package? And Katron Allen has been one of the... Nicholas Singleton, too. He's even admitted that. But Singleton is a top 10 running back in next year's NFL draft. I don't know that Katron Allen is. So meaning that Singleton could get selected possibly day 2. I'd say his frame is third, fourth, or fifth round. Katron Allen, what about his NFL prospects? I don't see him as a third, fourth, or fifth round prospect. Is he okay with being a sixth or a seventh? Does he come back to Penn State if Singleton leaves, or vice versa? Does Singleton come back and then Katron Allen has the Beau Pribula decision, if you will? I don't know. And there's also the spring transfer portal window. So even if something doesn't necessarily happen right now, it could happen later. That's why this conversation changes one way or another based on what we know in the middle of December. So much can change going into January after the season when these players actually make some of their NFL decisions. Denied Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, those kinds of things. So it's not even just the offense, but that's what we're talking about here, because Drew Allar's not throwing the ball to deny Dennis Sutton. I'm ready to see Andy Kotelnicki put 6 tight ends on the field and end the wide receiver conversation. As of right now, it would be a lot of 2. It'd be a lot of 2 tight end sets, maybe even 3 tight ends. Penn State really believes that Andrew Olish can contribute sooner rather than later. And I'm not making an argument that he would start and be that third tight end, hypothetically. Andrew Rapplier needs to work his way back from injury. So the tight end depth chart will be Khalil Dinkins, but Khalil Dinkins is not Tyler Warren. Luke Reynolds, sky high potential, but is not Tyler Warren. Andrew Rapplier has to work his way back from injury. And then you have the true freshman tight ends. And I don't want to leave Joey Schlaffer out of this. Everybody kind of forgets about Joey Schlaffer. Schlaffer was a top 10 tight end recruit once upon a time. So I don't want to neglect him. He's definitely talented, and he could start at other places if he thinks the tight end room's too crowded and enters the transfer portal. So be it. But he is good. Where did you get that sign at? Is that, the Team Ticker sign, teamticker.com. Love it. Love this sign. KJ Hamler type of receiver, stretch the field, put pressure on the safeties. So that's easier said than done, right? So this is a combination of kind of reacting to all of this plus talking about the transfer portal here. So add your comments, because this is where we will address them here before I get back into it. So Penn State has struck out on those elite wide receivers to this point. And I want to pull up a rankings list to try to get those transfer portal receivers. KC Concepcion is the name that everybody's going to know and remember, because he's the number 2 receiver according to On3. He's the number 2 overall player according to On3. So that's not, there's Eric Singleton Jr., and Penn State's not in that conversation. Penn State's not even in the conversation for KC Concepcion. Let's go to, and the top 3 players in the portal are all 3 receivers, according to On3. Singleton Jr., Concepcion, and Micah Hudson. Hudson's committed. Penn State would never have a chance with Hudson. He's from the Texas area. He already flipped from Texas Tech to Texas A&M. So that's finished. But Dane Key, Nick Anderson, all of these guys that are in the portal are staying in the SEC or flipping to the SEC. The names that Penn State has a realistic chance on, okay, one of them is Eric Rivers. I would like that addition for Penn State. He's coming from Florida International. This is the immediate comparison is to a Mitchell Tinsley type of impact. You're playing at group of 5. There is going to be that adjustment period. And Mitchell Tinsley, we didn't even get to see the full potential of Mitchell Tinsley, because Penn State really had to change its offense, and Mike Yurcich was OC. Remember that too. And it's not to dunk on Mike Yurcich, but with where Penn State was, they really had to scale back how much they were going to stretch the field. They had Singleton and Katron in their first seasons as true freshmen. They had lost Parker Washington at that point, if I'm not mistaken. And they had to go to this 2 wide receiver, 2 tight end, and just run the football. And that's how the offense went. So we didn't even get to see the best of Mitchell Tinsley, because he came from that air raid Western Kentucky offense. And I don't know too much about FIU as I sit here right now, but Eric Rivers would be a veteran receiver that at least gives you another playmaker. But is he a game changer? Is he someone that you would have to double team? Is he better than Trey Wallace? Are you just bringing in a receiver for the sake of bringing in a receiver? Another one that Penn State was in contact with. Again, Penn State's not doing well in the transfer portal right now when it comes to wide receivers. They missed out on Reginald Virgil. That was somebody that they had targeted early, were in contact with, and he flipped from Miami of Ohio to Texas Tech. So Texas Tech is already making wide receiver moves quickly. If I had my preference of anybody that could get outside of Concepcion, right? That's obviously, or an Eric Singleton Jr. from Georgia Tech. Those are obviously the gold standard of all of this. I like Kyron Hudson. I think Kyron Hudson was in too crowded of a timeshare over at USC. He visited Penn State. That would be my ideal target for Penn State. Another name that Penn State could have had a chance with, and it seems like that's not even remotely going to happen, even a conversation, is Caleb Odom. Does everybody remember how close Caleb Odom was as a prospect to committing to Penn State? And it was as a tight end. Who's to say you can't change positions and be a wide receiver, because that's what he's done here. He's a big-bodied wide receiver now at 6'4", 225 pounds. On3 projects him to go to Ole Miss. So what I'm trying to get at here is that you're losing Tyler Warren and you don't have the production, even the projected production right now, to kind of make up for some of these losses. Losing Julian Fleming in the scheme of things is a big deal. That's somebody that's smart. That's somebody that does more. I'm not looking for stat patters. I am looking for difference makers. Julian Fleming helped out by coaching some of these young receivers. So hopefully that pays off. That Tyseer Denmark and anything that Amari Evans could have learned in the process, and even Trey Wallace. Everyone should be a student of the game until they can't anymore. There's no reason that those guys couldn't learn anything from Fleming. But now you still lose that presence. Julian Fleming is ultra smart. He's probably going to be a coach one day if he decides to do that. I think Penn State would gladly take him on as a graduate assistant. So I hope people are understanding my point, is that you are not only losing veteran pass catchers, but one of them took up 75% of your production through the air. And who's going to step up and do that? What collection of players are going to step up and do that realistically? I can be optimistic and say that, oh yeah, Trey Wallace, Amari Evans, Caden Saunders, and Tyseer Denmark takes a step forward. There's still a reason we haven't seen Tyseer Denmark a lot this season. As great as he looks in practice, he's seen what? A half a dozen snaps to a dozen snaps in the middle of a game late in the season? Penn State made it very clear that he was going to redshirt based on the way they approached it. So is Denmark ready to go as a redshirt freshman? I would like to think so, but to get that Jahan Dotson, that KJ Hamler type of production, Chris Godwin, those are even Parker Washington, are any of these players that are coming back comparable and can give you the production and the game-changing ability of a Parker Washington? I don't know. I would like to say so, but I'm leaning against that they match a level of a Parker Washington, or definitely far from a KJ Hamler and definitely far from a Jahan Dotson. We're not even getting into the conversation. Allen Robinson is peak, right? So we'll continue this discussion. We'll take one more time out here and check in on your comments and feedback once again. Drew Allar coming back. It's a good news for Penn State. It's a positive domino to fall, but you still have to be able to back it up. This move does not matter unless you get the players to complement Allar coming back. We'll talk about it more on the other side of this break. And today's live show is also brought to you by FanDuel. You can keep the NFL action going with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet just $5. $5 and you will get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it's all on the same page where you place your bets. It's that convenient. It's that simple. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And if we look over at FanDuel.com, you can see the lines for Penn State versus SMU, the first round of the college football playoff. And Penn State is an 8.5-point favorite. The total is set at 53.5. No line movement here, folks. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com. And remember, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And let's jump back into it as we wrap it up here in the final segment. Win a national title, and we'll get all the players we want in the second portal window. Fair, yes. Actions speak louder than words, right? There's the NIL component to it. That's why Penn State is out of the running for players, or not even in the running. I don't even want to say they're out of the running. They're not even in the conversation to begin with. Singleton Jr., Concepcion, Micah Hudson, Those guys, they are not competing. They're not competing enough with NIL. And I'm just being honest. I'm being transparent. It is going to take somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000, and that might be a low ballpark there. 500,000 to $1 million. If you want an elite pass catcher out of the transfer portal, it's going to cost probably north of $1 million. Is Penn State prepared to spend that money when now you're retaining Drew Allar? So that's a portion of your payroll. Look at, this is what we're talking about in college football, man. College athletics. And we're talking about payroll, Penn State's payroll, right? Anyway, I digress from that. I don't need to soapbox speech about that. But you have Drew Allar on your payroll. What are you doing with Singleton, Katron Allen? Because those guys are going to command NIL dollars. Is Trey Wallace okay with his NIL package? You're losing Tyler Warren, so I guess those funds, if you will, can go to somebody else. But my point about the transfer portal does not matter for Penn State until you can even retain the players that you need. I do not like the transfer portal. This free agency doesn't work. Penn State is doing the right thing by building through high school recruiting, creating a foundation, and building depth. And so that guys, I mean, Drew Allar coming back, you notice how players just don't bounce around. And the reason Beau Pribula is going into the portal is because he has to, because he's not going to, it's not because he doesn't want to be at Penn State. It's not because he doesn't want to play in the college football playoff. It is the fact that he has an opportunity to start his remaining time in college football. Drew coming back, he's not going to start over Drew. So do you just want to be a gadget player for the rest of your life at Penn State? No, you're destined for better things. And I think James Franklin alluded to that in the press conference, if anybody caught it or saw some of the quotes. He says he has a responsibility to Penn State football, but honestly, I would not be surprised if he had a heart-to-heart conversation and said, hey, Beau, I think it would be in your best interest if you want to start at another Power 4 football program. We want you here, but you're destined for better things than this. You are more than QB2 at Penn State and the Lion quarterback, the Wildcat quarterback at Penn State. Go start at a Power 4 program, make more NIL money because you would be the face of that team, and go play. And that's why Franklin said that I would recruit Beau just as much, if not more, knowing what I know now about Pribula as a player and as a person. So that speaks volumes. My point being in all of this, that the portal, so to circle back, because I don't want to get off track, the portal doesn't matter for Penn State until they're able to figure out what they're doing with its current players that are on the fringe, that are on the fence. Do I go to the NFL? Do I stay? Denai Sutton, Zane Durant, Kobe King. To an extent, right, you don't know what Jalen Kimber is doing. Jalen Kimber has eligibility. You want to be able to retain him. But guys that could go off to the NFL, Singleton, you need to be able to retain those players first and then go into the portal. But in the process, okay, you work out NIL deals with all of these players that are NFL caliber, even though they might not be first-round picks. Zane Durant and Denai Sutton, third, fourth round in their present. I think that's fair. Again, I don't know exactly where scouts would place them, but they're certainly not sixth or seventh round talent. They can play their way into first and second round picks with another season, but that's why KJ Winston went into the NFL, because KJ Winston, let's talk about his situation. Why didn't he come back? He's coming off of an injury, didn't play his junior season, but he will actually make a decent amount of money in comparison. So what's true for Drew Allar is not true for KJ Winston, and KJ Winston is in a similar, or Denai Sutton and Zane Durant are in a similar situation to KJ Winston, where you can go into the NFL now, get that $1 million contract as a third or a fourth round pick, because they would never be first overall picks. That's the life-changing money right out of the gate, where you can get $40 million up front with your contract and make $10 million roughly per season. There's incentives, bonuses, and all that stuff, right? I think the annual salary is a give or take $10 million. If you're KJ Winston, Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, you might be better off going into the NFL if you have a third or fourth round grade and get a head start on that second contract. Because I agree with Drew Allar's decision. I agree with Beau Pribula's decision. I agree with KJ Winston's decision. And from what I know about Zane Durant and Denai Sutton, at least the way that I view them as third or fourth round picks, kind of like a KJ Winston, I would not blame them for going into the NFL. So how is Penn State approaching that? Because you don't want to build the team through the transfer portal. You don't want to get all these players that have not played the Penn State way for the past season, and then you're scrambling to build some chemistry and continuity. So they got to get all the players, their current roster, in place before we can even talk about the portal. What are you doing with Singleton? Deny Dennis Sutton. Zane Durant. You missed out on KJ Winston. He's clearly off to the NFL. It would have been nice to have him back. What about a Zach Wheatley? Even a Zach Wheatley is a player that could go into the NFL if he so decided. It's quite the balancing act. It really is. Let's see, we got some more comments here. Ooh, we're talking SMU. Why not? SMU's turnovers come in spurts, and then they have 3 or 4 games where they have few and don't put turnovers in your bank just yet. Okay, so you're pointing to... I'll answer that briefly. So Kevin Jennings is a home run and a strikeout type of player, to bring baseball into this and make the comparison. I feel like Jennings's biggest weakness is he's a one-read quarterback. And if Tom Allen can do enough to take those first reads away, the offensive line doesn't block long enough. I'm not saying that's a bad offensive line, but the offense is designed to go quick, up-tempo, first read, football out. That's the way SMU is built. And if you do anything to throw that process off, Jennings is careless with the football. I watched the Duke game in particular. There should have been more turnovers in that game, and there weren't, because they got lucky. An SMU player fell on the football. Jennings is careless with the football, whether that's because of where he is in his development. He's only a redshirt sophomore. This is his first season starting. He wasn't even the starter at the beginning of the season. I'll leave it at that. Kevin Jennings is hit or miss, truly. He can hit the home run, he can strike out. He does everything, and he does the inverse of that. He can unfold everything too. So it's a boom or bust, any type of play for that quarterback. Does Penn State's approach to the guys in the portal hurt them? They seem to go after guys that they have previous relationships with and some sort of connection with. I have no issue with that. It builds that continuity. I don't know how close Colorado is going to get to a national title game, because I agree. My opinion is I agree with the way that Penn State does all of this. I agree with the way that they approach high school recruiting, the transfer portal, that they don't try to build college football's version of free agency. It leads to selfishness. It leads to, because chemistry matters. Even though chemistry doesn't show up in the analytics and all that stuff, they have players that are all working towards the same thing, and they all have the same common goal, while in the process they benefit with NIL on the side. But it is not the driving factor here. That stuff matters. It doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but in reality, it does. I'm just saying you don't have a measure that can quantify it, if you will. You don't have something that can actually measure it. Like here's a chemistry rating. You don't have that. You just kind of have to guess. And if you do that through the portal, you don't want to have to build a rapport with somebody that you've never spoken with just because you think they're good at football. I like the way that Penn State does this and gets players that that were close to committing or had a really good relationship with the coaching staff at first, and they just happened to go somewhere else that didn't work out. There's no issue with that there. If Allar stays, what are the odds that others stay, like Allen, Singleton, and Dennis Sutton? It's important that the quarterback is staying, because that is a dominant. So Andy Kotelnicki was the first one. If Andy Kotelnicki leaves for a head coaching job, then Drew Allar is going off to the NFL. It did not benefit Allar to come back for another season with a third different offensive coordinator. Even if that was Ty Howell or Jay Sider or Danny O'Brien, if they stayed in-house, it was going to be a third different OC. That wouldn't have helped Allar go to the NFL. So now you have your offensive coordinator back. Now you have your quarterback back. That's going to have a trickle-down effect to where other players are going to want to stay. But there has to be an incentive for them to stay as well. It's not just going to be, oh, well, Drew's back, so we'll all come back. No, this has to benefit them. So in Penn State's recruiting process, point to players like Jahan Dotson and Tyler Warren and say, hey, if and when you come back, you won't make a lot of NIL money now, and you're passing up on some millions of dollars, a couple $1 million at the NFL level with a third or a fourth or a fifth round pick. That's fine. That didn't work out for KJ Winston, clearly. But for Denai Dennis Sutton, who I think could play his way into the first round if things go right, because he would be the premier pass rusher. Abdul Carter's going off to the NFL. There's no way you're getting him back with NIL. He's going. But then Denai Dennis Sutton can now be that premier pass rusher and be one of those focal points on the defense, if you get what I'm saying. Point to Tyler Warren. Hey, he could have went in the draft early and been a 5th or a 6th round pick. Now he's a clear-cut first rounder. Jahan Dotson, same thing, would have been a 5th or a 6th round pick. Now he was a first round pick. So point to those positives and don't negative like, don't point to, this is what you're going to miss out on if you go early. Point to, hey, this is what can happen if you stay behind, like a Warren and a Jahan Dotson, if you will. I think we see more interest from top receivers now that Drew Allar has put out a statement that he's staying. It depends. Right now, it's not working. Guys like Singleton, Concepcion, Hudson, Dane Key from Kentucky, Berrien Brown from Kentucky, Nick Anderson from Oklahoma. Deuce Robinson is also from USC, like Kyron Hudson. They can get an Eric Rivers. That would be a step in the right direction. But I'm saying those elite difference makers at the pass catcher, guys that would be in line for awards, that's what I'm looking for in this offense. You need guys that are going to be best in the country that can be up for those all-conference type of awards. I don't know that Eric Rivers is that. I would say my hope is that Kyron Hudson could be like that if you give him the volume of work. But there's a reason that he was the 4th, 5th option at USC. I'm just saying. So I think that's where we can wrap it up here. One more comment. So how many quarterbacks back up Drew with Beau leaving? Okay, that's another question to answer. So Ethan Grunkemeyer immediately becomes quarterback 2. Jackson Smolik just got cleared. So that's your depth chart, and then Tyler Warren will be the new, or not the new, but Beau Pribula, that's where he will replace his role as that Lion quarterback. Those packages, which they've already been doing. So you just lose that insurance. It's not ideal going into the postseason. But again, I will never fault Beau Pribula. And I think James Franklin honestly encouraged him to make that decision. That's just my opinion, though. That'll do it for this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Good news that Drew Allar's coming back. It's a step in the right direction, but you have to be able to check off some of those other boxes if you are going to help Drew succeed in his senior season. Please leave a like on this live episode, share it with friends and family, and if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams.